Behind me is the Sharon Harris nuclear plant, located near New Hill in North Carolina. It's massive, as you can see, and it produces 900 megawatts of power a day. And 900 megawatts is a pretty fair amount of power. I mean, 1 billion megawatts equals 1 petajoule, though, and that's just an incomprehensible amount of energy. Well, apparently not so incomprehensible to the Soviet Union, who in the early 1960s dropped a bomb, the Tsar Bomba, that was 250 petajoules. For reference, that's enough energy to power this thing for 64,000 days, or 176 years. By the 1970s and 1980s, it made absolute sense between both the Soviet Union and the United States why denuclearization was necessary, why we needed to limit nuclear weapons the world over, and why we needed to just destroy them. Okay, it's pretty interesting, but did it work? Does it work? And can we still learn stuff from it? My name is Jack Blakesley, and today we're going to learn about SALT 1, SALT 2, and the various attempts of denuclearization during the 1980s. It's going to be a wild ride, so buckle up, Buttercup. It's going to be a big old party, I guess. Also, I can't explain everything about SALT 1 and SALT 2 and the nuclear talks during the 1980s out here in the woods. So let's get back to the drawing board where we can find out a bit more. Before we can talk about anything on the drawing board, that's this thing right here, we have to talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Cuban Missile Crisis was an event that happened in 1962 that really scared many Americans and kind of told them what nuclear war could very well be. Thankfully, nothing ever happened, but it was started after the U.S. put nuclear weapons pointed at Russia and Turkey and Greece, so the Soviet Union responded by putting nuclear weapons in Cuba pointed at the United States. This really scared a lot of Americans, and we almost really did go to war. So a few years after the fact, President Lyndon B. Johnson proposed limiting nuclear arms worldwide, and it was something that was pretty well liked. Signed in 1972 after 3 years of negotiations, the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty 1, also known as SALT 1, was signed by President Richard Nixon and Russian Secretary General Brezhnev in order to limit anti-ballistic missiles, or ABMs, until a more comprehensive plan could be put into play. So it was really like an interim plan, so they wouldn't kind of destroy each other's countries before the more comprehensive plan could be signed, which was SALT 2, which was signed by, once again, Brezhnev and President Jimmy Carter in 1979. 7 years of negotiations went into this thing, so it's massive. It's absolutely gigantic. But there was a problem. The problem being that the Soviet Union had very large nuclear weapons, and not a lot of them. They're just massive weapons that would destroy metropolitan areas, while the U.S. had a lot more smaller and more accurate weapons. So they came to many disagreements on that. But in 1979, they did agree that they should limit the number of missile launch devices used by both superpowers and limit the number of missiles used by each side to about 2,400. 2,400 weapons is a lot. That's 4,800 between the two countries, not counting the ones that France and the UK had at the time. So while it was a lot less than what they had before, they didn't really act much on it.
I, as President, am entrusted with the security of the United States of America. I would never take any action that would jeopardize that sacred trust. President Brezhnev, you and I both have children and grandchildren, and we want them to live, and to live in peace. We have both worked hard to give our own and our nation's security, and our own nation's children that security. We realize that no one treaty, no one meeting can guarantee the future safety of our nations. In the end, peace can be won only if we have pursued it and struggled tenaciously to keep the peace all along. Yet this fight for peace has often seemed the most difficult victory to win.
Even after the signing of SALT I, it was proof that the US and the Soviet Union could work together on reducing nuclear weapons. But, well, when Reagan came to power in 1981, that took a bit of a change. One of the agreements of SALT II is that the countries would not start new nuclear weapons defense programs, only that the existing ones that they had, they could use. But Reagan decided that he wasn't really going to take part in that, and in 1984 he launched the Strategic Defense Initiative, also known as SDI, also nicknamed Star Wars by the media. SDI was a plan to really put nuclear weapons in space. So if the US was attacked, they would attack the Soviet Union from space. It's an absolutely insane idea. And then President Reagan got the Soviet Union to actually believe him. And they really thought that he had nuclear weapons in space. What? Okay, that is insane, because it is insane. In October 1986, both Reagan and Gorbachev met in Reykjavik, Iceland, in order to deliberate the possible outlawing of nuclear weapons. But that really wasn't part of Reagan's agenda, as he still had SDI on the table, and, well, because Gorbachev knew that he had SDI on the table, the pretty good talks ended at the last second. They just dropped everything. They went away with nothing. On the upside of the Reykjavik summit, in 1987, the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty was signed, which banned intermediate and short-range missiles. And that was really, really good. It was a big step forward. It was the largest step forward since SALT II signed 8 years previous. Both countries had the disarmament bug, so in 1991, both Gorbachev and then-President George H.W. met in order to cite... Okay. Both countries had the nuclear weapons disarmament bug, so in 1991, Gorbachev and new President George H.W. Bush met to sign START, which was the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. And that was a treaty that was supposed to reduce up to 80% of nuclear weapons by 2001. And guess what? They did. By 2001, 80% of the world's nuclear weapons had been completely removed and eradicated to the point that they couldn't be used. This was a big step forward for both countries, and it was fantastic. Well, a few months after that was signed, the Soviet Union collapsed. But this is even better news. When the Russian Federation was founded after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, they kept on doing START, as did the US government. So when START expired in 2009, they renewed START, and there's been a lot less nuclear weapons now than there have been since, well, the 1970s. There is some bad news, though. Well, there is some bad news. There is some bad news, though. With lots of tensions between the US and the Soviet Union, they haven't really been acting upon New START, which was signed by President Obama and the then Russian president back in 2010. And with the new administration with the new administration coming into power very soon, and with the new White House administration coming into power very soon, it's pretty scary to see what the nuclear world will show us in the future. Whatever does happen, we do know that the US and Russia have worked together in the past for the greater good of the world. So, I have complete faith that we will not go into nuclear war, but you never really know what's gonna happen. Either way, my name is Jack Blakesley. I hope that you enjoyed this little presentation, this little brief overview of what happened, and I hope you have yourselves a nice day. Thank you.